Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer with the Library of Congress Oral History Project, and which is so capably handled here at our main public library in Cincinnati. Dennis Daly, our videographer, and today we have the honor and the pleasure, and particularly for me, to be able to interview a friend, Bob Keller from Cincinnati. And Bob, welcome to the interview process here. And you're going to get a DVD of the interview for your family and everything, and that's always very nice. They send a copy of it to the Library of Congress in Washington archives, and keep a copy here in the Public Library archives. So you're covered. Whether you like it or not, you're in the history books.
Well, thank you.
Where were you born, Bob?
Born in Oxford, Ohio, August the 6th, 1925, on a farm literally around a farm right outside of Oxford.
Out there in Butler County.
Yes, sir.
How about that? Did you have a big family, or?
No, I had one sister who is still in Oxford, and that was the extent of it.
Mm-hmm. And your parents ran the farm and
yes,
produced produce and so forth?
And then during the war, both of my parents worked at Wright Aeronautical here in Cincinnati.
Oh my gosh.
Produced airplane engines.
Sure. Oh, isn't that's so interesting. Well, now 1925, yeah, that was a very prominent year. And of course, Calvin Coolidge was still president then.
Yep. As a kid, he came through Oxford on a train, and I remember seeing him on the back of the
no kidding.
What do they call that car?
On the observation?
Observation car, yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Yep.
Yeah, the old-fashioned beating the bushes.
Yep.
And well, that's a wonderful memory. So did you start elementary school there in Oxford?
I went to McGuffey Elementary for 6 years.
Famous school.
And after McGuffey, we moved to Hamilton, and I went to Wilson Junior High in Hamilton for 3 years. After the rent came due, we went to Cincinnati, and I went 4 years to Hughes and graduated from Hughes in 1943.
Well, how about that? Well, that is, and you know, it's so interesting, particularly, excuse me, in this area, because so many people of our era had Hughes High School as their high school, and you know,
many very prominent people were Hughes.
Many prominent people,
Hughes
wonderful people like you and your classmates, and of course Hughes.
No, I said prominent people.
Well, you don't have to be prominent to be wonderful. But, you know, and I, not being a native Cincinnatian myself, not having grown up here, I was impressed early on to hear about and meet so many people who went through Hughes High School in our Rotary Club and so forth and so on. Did you have any particular interests or hobbies in school as a boy?
Well, I played tennis.
Oh, good.
I was on the last Hughes tennis team to win the Cincinnati Public High Championship.
Well, good for you.
Of course, haven't been active for the last 20 or 30 years.
I know it. That's a shame. I know it. I hate to see that. You play singles and doubles?
Well, I generally played doubles on the team. My senior year, I did play a few singles, but not much. Played Billy Talbert.
Oh, sure.
Not in competition, but we hit balls.
You knew him?
And Tony Trabert. I did play Tony Trabert in a match. He was a freshman, I was a senior, and I think we lost 6-1, 6-0.
That sounds like my kind of game. Well, Tony Trabert, of course, he was a Navy guy too, you know, and after the war. But Billy Talbert, I remember him very well. I was involved in tennis for a number of years, and met him several times here in town, the old tennis club and so forth.
Well,
and he was an outstanding citizen, and of course he was a veteran too.
Yep. He used to come down to the Coy Field tennis courts, which was at the end of Digby Avenue, and that's where I got to hit some balls with him, and it was quite an honor.
Yeah, I should say. Where did you live on campus?
In Cincinnati?
Yeah.
Stratford Avenue, on the corner of Stratford and Digby.
I'll be
Right
darned.
down from the University of Cincinnati.
Sure, sure. Well, those days, of course, were very, very interesting. You went through on the GI Bill of Rights, did you?
Oh, yes.
After the war?
Oh, you mean where did I live at Miami?
No, I mean here. It's in, at UC.
Yeah. No, I didn't go to UC.
Oh, that's right. I'm wrong.
Let's get that straight.
Yeah, Stratford and Digby is Oxford.
No, Stratford and Digby is Cincinnati. That's where I lived when I was in high school.
Okay.
I went to the service from that address.
That's right.
When I came home, my folks had moved back to Oxford, and I lived in Oxford at home when I went to the university.
I see.
On the GI Bill, one of the greatest things that ever happened, and so many did not take advantage of it.
I know it. It was really the rebuilding of a nation, you know it?
Yeah, I got a bachelor's and a master's on the GI Bill.
Wonderful. Simply wonderful. Well, what was your field of study?
Education.
Okay.
I was a teacher for 30 years, and I came back and taught at Hughes for 11 years, and then we built Aiken, and I transferred to Aiken and retired from Aiken in 1977.
Well, I'll be darned. And you're an English teacher? History?
Industrial arts, drafting.
Industrial arts.
Drafting.
Hands-on.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a great program, too.
Yeah.
I remember in my high school days, there was a program, it had the name Hughes in it. It was a nationwide program that was, anyway, your school days, I find with all interviewees, as it is with me, means so much to each of us.
Oh, yeah.
Now, where were you on December the 7th, 1941?
It was in the auditorium at Hughes High School. They moved all the seniors and juniors, and the principal came on and said, "We have a very important announcement." And they put it over the PA, and we were all able to hear
Right there.
Mr. Roosevelt
Yeah,
give us that famous speech.
I should say. Isn't that something?
Yep.
Well, you know, there are certain dates and times in everyone's life that they never forget.
That's right.
Where they were and what they
Yep.
experienced.
That's one of them.
That certainly is one of them. Okay, so there you were, and all of a sudden your life changed. How did you get into the military?
Well, I tried to get in the Air Force. Three of us we were seniors, and we got an application and went up to Wright-Patterson Field, and the one fella, I have to say, didn't make the mental, and the other two did. And next day we went in for the physical, and I was in line for eyes, and they gave me those little charts with the numbers in them, and I could not pick those numbers out. I'm completely colorblind, red, green.
For heaven's
And
sake.
then the other fella, he had too much overbite for the Air Force. However, he ended up in the Navy Air and was a radio man in the Naval Air.
Wonderful. Well, it's funny how things like that happen. And of course, in those days, it really depended upon who was interviewing you and who was inspecting you and asking you questions and so forth.
Yes. After I was drafted and went over to Fort Thomas, they pulled 10 of us out, took us over to another building, and we didn't know what it was for, and found out that they were looking for pilots. This was, I guess 4 months later. And I said, you don't want me, I'm colorblind. And they said, well, go home and eat some carrots and come back, because they were really needing pilots.
Now, what year was this?
43.
43. That's right.
Yeah, they were shooting them down like crazy, and they were really hungry to get people into the Air Force.
Right, right.
But at that time, I had taken some tests, and I thought I was going to be a photographer in the war, and that didn't quite work out. I ended up in the infantry.
That was not an uncommon happening. I know that happened to a lot of fellas. Well, so there you were in the Army, and where did they send you?
Camp Blanding, Florida. Well, first we were over to Fort Thomas.
Fort Thomas,
From Fort
and then-
Thomas to Camp Blanding,
And
Florida.
you took the train down there.
I took training in INR, and I thought that sounded pretty good. Intelligence and reconnaissance.
Yeah.
That was until I got to Oran, Africa, where there was a rest and rehab
Oh.
camp as well as a replacement camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to some INR people and found out that really isn't the best part of the infantry to be in,
Uh-huh.
because you're right out in front.
Well,
You're a
sure.
scout, and I was young, didn't know any better. But anyway, it worked out very well.
Well, I should say, in your training now, after Blandings, then where did you go?
Came home on a delay en route,
Oh,
and from there we went to Fort Meade, Maryland, stayed, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days. They put us on a train at night, and we pulled up next to a ship in Newport News.
how about that?
And then we knew we were
That was
on
it.
our way.
That was the big one.
Yeah,
Oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
Was that an Army transport or something?
No, well, it was the USS W.A. Mann. It was a converted cruise ship transferred
Oh,
to
sure.
a
Right.
who had 5,000 on it.
Wow, wow. Now, going across the Atlantic, what are we talking about? Early 1944?
It was, I guess, March or April of 43.
43. Oh,
No,
44.
I'm wrong. 44.
Yeah, yeah,
44.
yeah. Well, I got you.
We went unescorted,
Wow.
zigzagged 5 days
Yeah.
until we got out 200 miles from the Straits of Gibraltar, and we picked up 2 British corvettes escort through the Straits, and we ended up in Oran, Africa, in a replacement depot. Stayed there 2 weeks.
So you went right past the gates of Hercules. Isn't that something? What an experience
Yep.
for a guy from
A
Ohio.
little Oxford farm.
Farm boy from Ohio. Well, you know, this was what was so great about World War II and our armed forces.
At the time, we weren't thinking it was such a great experience, of course.
No,
But,
but you were seeing
oh yeah,
historical places and
absolutely.
getting into the Med and all of that sort of thing.
Right.
Well, okay, so that was late spring of 44, and by that time, what was the situation in North Africa?
Well, the war was over in North Africa.
Okay.
Yes.
We'd
Yes.
driven the Africa Corps out and all that sort of thing.
At that time, they were on Anzio in Italy,
Okay.
and that's where I ended up. But when we shipped out of Oran, we were on a British converted cruise ship to a troop ship, and we went out into the Mediterranean. The next thing we know, we're in a convoy, and we figured there had to be at least 50,000 troops in the convoy. We had a small aircraft carrier and a couple of cruisers and several destroyers in the convoy.
Wow.
And we thought, we're going to end up through the Suez Canal, out the other way, and into Japan,
Yeah.
Pacific. Well, that didn't work out. When we woke up the next morning, we were all by ourselves again, and we saw some land on both sides, and we were going, I guess, between Sicily and Italy, and we ended up in Naples. But we couldn't get into Naples. The sunken ships were so heavy that
Oh,
you
the
couldn't get
harbor,
into
yeah.
dock, yes.
Harbor was all cluttered up.
So we went in on landing craft infantry.
Well, now that you know, here again, you're seeing Italy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Foreign country and everything. And what were you then? PFC or corporal by that time, or what?
Just a PFC.
PFC.
Yeah.
And what outfit were you with?
Well, I was a replacement at that point. So we went to a replacement camp about as close as I can remember, 20, 30 miles from Naples, and trained there for 2 weeks, mostly just trying to get our bodies back in shape. Force marches and night marches, and because we'd been loafing around for about 3 or 4 weeks and hadn't done any physical training. And then they would call a group out each evening, and that's where I volunteered for rifleman in order to get out of the INR area.
Had you ever done any game hunting or anything like that at home, or handled any firearms?
When I was about 10 years old, my uncle, who was a school teacher, bought me a rifle.
Oh.
It was about $10 at that time.
Yeah.
Boy, that was an expensive Christmas gift.
You bet.
And the next morning, we went out hunting. We went out through 2 of our fields and came up through the lane, and he said, "There's one," because we hadn't seen any rabbits. And I said, "Where?" He says, "I'm in that bush." He said, "Shoot." So I shot. To this day, I think my uncle had shot that rabbit, put it there to make sure that I got something at first hunting experience.
Wonderful story.
And really, that's about the only hunting experience I'd ever had.
Yeah. So here you were going to be a rifleman.
Yep.
For Uncle Sam.
Yep.
And of course, you had to learn about all the parts, breaking it down, putting it back together again.
Well, we did that in basic training. We did the M1 and the carbine and a machine gun. We had those 3 that I had experience on.
Yeah.
But
well, that's a great childhood story. I'll bet you got 1,000 of them too. Well, we'll get back to some of those maybe. So there you were. Now you were ashore, as you say, maybe 20 to 30 miles outside of Naples, right?
yes, yes.
On the north, going up the
Well,
coast?
I think it would have been east.
East.
Now, I don't know the name of the camp. It was a lot of soldiers.
Yeah.
All replacements.
Yeah. Oh, they were all replacements by that time. Now, this was still what, March of '44?
Yeah, March or April.
Yeah,
Probably April,
March or April
at this point.
So the landings in Normandy hadn't taken place
no,
yet.
no.
Yeah.
And they had, at this point, they had pushed off of Anzio, and they were heading in the direction of Rome. And when we got called out as a replacement, well, we were trucked from this camp to Anzio, which was another smaller replacement camp at that time, because they had fortunately pushed off from that place. That was a
Terrible place.
terrible.
Well, now, did you learn about any of the fallout from the Anzio campaign itself, from any of the soldiers there? Or?
Well, no, not really.
Yeah,
not
'cause
really.
That was a terrible thing.
Oh, it was. It
land.
was bloody.
Oh, it was bloody,
It was
and
a
we made so
bloody
many
war.
mistakes.
Yeah.
Mark
Yep.
Clark and all that.
Yeah. But anyway, when we got there, why, we were north of Rome at that point.
Okay. Now, who was your commanding officer?
Well, we didn't have any command at that point. We were just replacements.
So you, who did they hook you up with?
Well, I ended up with the 91st Division.
91st.
And from Anzio, we went by truck and went through Rome, and I don't remember exactly how far it was, but maybe 50 miles if it was that far. And it was pouring down rain, and another wonderful experience for a young kid. And when we got to the company, and they dropped 3 of us off, and it was K Company, 361st Infantry, 91st Division, 3rd Battalion. I'll remember that
I
forever.
should say.
And the commander said, pitch your pup tent, because it was pouring down rain, which I did. And at that point, I ran into a buck sergeant of the weapons platoon. I didn't even know the makeup of a infantry company.
Mm-hmm.
That I found out that there are 3 rifle platoons, one weapons platoon. And the sergeant proceeded to tell me that the rifle companies are out front and we bring up the rear. And I'll have to admit that was enough for me, for me to take a cue that I would like to be in the weapons company. Well, it happened that it did work out that way. After we got our tents pitched, we went up to the captain, and his first word was, "Are any of you weapons men?" The other 2 didn't say anything, and I said, "Well, sir, I'm not a weapons man, but I'm willing to learn." He said, "You're a second gunner on a 60mm mortar."
Wow.
I had no idea what the duties were.
What's that?
But anyway, then he assigned the other 2, and we went back to the tents, and I got a hold of this sergeant, and I told him, I said, "I'm going to be a second gunner on a 60mm mortar." And he said, "Well, in the morning, I'll show you what your job is." Had no idea. And it was to pull the pin, drop the shell down in the mortar, and also to carry the mortar shells.
Oh, boy.
Which I wasn't aware of, but
And-
it was hard. Except I ended up not being a good soldier in that respect either. Because when we went into combat, we took off on tanks. And there would be, I don't know, 6 or 8 on a tank. And I had my shells over my shoulder, and we hadn't been on the road 20 minutes till there was a huge bang. And I yelled, I said, what was that? And they said, "Well, probably one of the lead tanks got hit." Mm-hmm. And I'm still on that tank with my shells, and the rest of them were down in the ditch.
Wow.
And not thinking, I threw my shells off on the tank. It's when we won the war. If we'd had too many soldiers like I am. Threw my shells on the tank, jumped off, and got down in the ditch. And I said, "Well, what do we do now?" And he said, "Well, we just stay here till we hear what's going on."
All clear.
And I never did get back on a tank. We started maneuvering around through depressions in the land, and as I remember, then the later shells started coming in, and war was on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where did you first come in contact with the enemy?
Well, it would be, we were going to be in Pisa in 3 days. Now, I can't tell you how far Pisa would have been, but I would assume that it was about 75 miles. That was just a guess. Well, it was 3 months, I think, before we took Pisa.
Wow,
But
that's tough.
it was north of Rome, and I really don't have any specific as to where I went into combat.
Did you have any, was your outfit exposed to the battle for Monte Cassino, for example?
No.
No.
We missed out on that.
Yeah.
We went up Highway 65, which at that time was one of the larger highways in Italy. Now they've got, like we have, super highways,
Sure.
and this 65 is almost a back road.
Now, by that time, Italy was just about ready to pull out of the war, wasn't it?
They were out of the war.
They were out of the war.
They were out
Okay.
at that point.
Right.
The Germans were
Yeah, in charge.
in
sure.
charge.
Well, now, there were several that I've read, and people with whom I've discussed this, that there were several lines that the Nazis had established
Yes.
up the boot.
Yeah.
And the Siegfried line and the
Siegfried.
whatever and so
And
forth.
Apennine Mountain was another
Oh,
pretty
yeah,
big battle.
Yeah.
And where I got captured, I shouldn't say I should say where our company got captured,
Oh, your whole company.
was in Liverganano. And we went in on midnight attack, which we had never gone out at midnight or after dark before. And we were to take this town of Liverganano, and we had met some action at about 12:20, I would guess, and got the word to draw back, and then the word came to move out. You know, we were in a single file, dark. One guy's following the guy ahead of him, and we all ended up in a building in the edge of this town. Once we got in, they had machine guns that had zeroed in on the door, and we were all in one building.
I'll be the whole company.
It was a 3-story building,
Uh-huh.
and at this point, I was actually dog robbing for the captain. I think I was the youngest guy on the outfit, and they didn't think I was very efficient, probably, as a soldier. But I was his radio man, and we set up headquarters on the 3rd floor.
And what do you mean by dog robbing?
Well, I took care of the captain,
Oh, I see.
radio man, and I was also had in charge of the mail when we got mail. And
Did you scrounge?
yeah. I have another word for it, but I won't put it on this. I won't put it on this video.
Well, that's just fascinating. And I know that your family is going to be so happy to hear this story. And if you have anything else that comes to mind about face-offs with your own men, men that you met from other parts of the country or anything like that?
Well, before I started dog robbing, we got what we called at that time a 90-day wonder second lieutenant.
Oh, yeah.
And he was the commander of the weapons platoon. And the captain, where I was the night that we moved into this building, sent word downstairs that he'd like to have a volunteer with a squad to see if they could get back to let him know that our position and what a predicament we had gotten into.
Sure.
And this 90-day wonder, who was from Marysville, was that down on the river?
Marysville? Ohio?
Yeah.
No, Marysville, Ohio's up
Well, this would be
central part of the
east.
state. Marietta?
Marietta. He was
Marietta.
from Marietta.
Okay.
And he volunteered to take a squad, and 3 or 4 others volunteered, and they got out the door, and we heard machine gun fire, and I think 1 or 2 came back in wounded.
Gosh.
And but he was, to me, a hero. That's
Really?
what I was anything but a hero when it comes to
But
being a soldier.
He was a shave tail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
That's amazing.
He was a real hero.
Did you ever have any contact with him since?
No, and I forgot his name. I often wanted to go to Marietta and see if I could find some of his
Sure.
parents, but I couldn't remember his name when I got back. And
Well, you know, that, as we've all had the similar experience in the service, there are certain people that you kind of hook on to.
oh yeah,
And they could be as far away as the opposite side of the country
Yep.
from where you lived, never lay his eyes on them. And do you go to reunions? You have
oh
an-
yes.
91st has a reunion? for
Yeah,
example?
I've been to Denver. I've been to Georgia. I forget the name of the camp that we went to. Columbus, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Big infantry
Fort
camp
Benning.
down Fort Benning.
Sure.
And the last one that we went to was in Michigan, Grand Rapids.
Oh, I'll be there.
And the numbers are just so far down. I don't know if we're going to have another one or not.
I know.
But I still get the bulletin. I'm a lifetime member of the
That's great.
organization. and
That's great.
Still get
Well,
the
you know,
bulletin.
that's so important, Bob, is to keep those
Yeah.
things alive.
There are still 2 of us that we know of that were in the POW camp
Now,
that are alive.
yeah. All right, now, So you're up there and you're on your way to Pisa. Did you get into Pisa?
I didn't, no.
Oh, you
We
didn't?
were sitting on a hill and somebody had some glasses and I got to see the Leaning
saw
Tower
the
of Pisa
Leaning
from,
Tower.
I guess, 3 or 4 miles.
But
I
that
don't know
was
how
the
far we
closest
were,
you got.
but it was interesting just
Well,
to
I
see
should
it.
say, well, tell us some more about that period of time up till when you were captured.
Well, first of all, we hadn't had any ammunition or food for 3 days. And the word was that a mule train got knocked out. It was bringing the ammunition and food.
Huh.
Of course, the food would have been K rations, but
Yeah.
that would have been welcome. So that was another reason why we had a little problem when we got in this building. We literally ran out of all ammunition and had nothing to fight back with. And of course, I was upstairs and on the radio mostly. We tried to get artillery in, and this was the next morning, we'd call for a round of smoke, and they'd say smoke on the way. We only had vision from one side in this building,
Sure.
and we couldn't find the smoke, and so we finally, the Germans, after they came and made 2 or 3 attempts to get in the first floor. The 3rd time they got in, the word came up the steps, they're in down here, we're going to have to give up. We got the radio going to Battalion, and Captain Sigmund got on it and said, I'm going to have to give up my command, they're in downstairs, and we're going out.
Wow.
Well, B Company, I believe it was on its way up. This was a precarious situation. There was a mountain on one side and a valley on another, and this road and this little village in between the two on a little flat spot. But anyway, B Company had come up, and they saw us come out of the building and give up with our hands over our heads. And I'll say this for the Germans. We had some wounded downstairs, and they came in, brought a tank around, and put the wounded on the tank and carted them away. We don't know where they took them to or what happened to them, because they were not with the main group when we were marched back. But it was a different experience.
Well, I should say.
However, I'm the lucky one. I'm back.
Yes.
And so many,
God bless
so
you.
many of your friends and mine
I know.
that were with us are not.
I know.
And they're the heroes.
Well, they are. And you know, there was an article in the paper just this week or last week about how the war veterans who are alive today think about the fellas that never came back.
Yeah.
That was prime consideration.
Right.
You lost your buddies.
Yep.
Men like yourself gave their lives for their country and all that sort of thing. And it's real and it's true, and people have got to, you know, in younger generations today, we have a little problem with. They just don't, sometimes.
As I look back, I think of this sergeant in the weapons platoon. He probably saved my life
Isn't that
by
something?
getting me into the weapons platoon rather than being an infantryman with a rifle on my shoulder.
Now, tell us what it was really like to be the ammunition provider to a 60 millimeter mortar. How about the sound and everything?
Well,
And you had to duck and
No, you just stood back and dropped it in that way, and
away she went.
they just went up.
That was a heck of a weapon, though, wasn't it?
The gunner was the one that had to aim it, and you know, it's such a rinky-dink thing when you think about it. It's just a tripod, and you move it up or down, and I don't know how we ever got range on anything, but the gunner had experience. So I guess he knew what he was doing. All I knew was I was to pull the pin and drop the shell in.
How about that? So a lot of eyeballing to
Oh,
figure out.
absolutely. Oh, it was more. Well, sometimes they wouldn't even leave it on a tripod. The gunner would hold it.
Oh, about that? Well, that what an experience that was, and you're carrying that, you're carrying the projectiles on your shoulder and everything.
3 shells on the front and 3 on the back in a
How
cloth bag.
How about that? Now,
Until I laid them on the tank.
yeah,
Then they were gone.
yeah. Hey, Keller, what became of that stuff?
Give us a shell, Keller. Oh, what
Well,
a
now
war.
being a radio man too. Now that must have been pretty interesting
Well, it was.
because
It
you
was.
heard
Yeah.
commands and
Well, we had a 300 radio. I don't know if you remember. Well, you
I've
were.
seen pictures of it.
Yeah, you were in the
I was in the
Navy.
Yeah.
But we had a 300 radio, and you carried it on your back. And my job was to just get in touch with Battalion, and then I'd hand the mic to the captain, and he would
I
do
see.
all the messaging.
I see. But you were the guy that zeroed in and
I
turned
carried,
the dials.
I carried the 300 for
Was that a heavy piece?
I'm guessing, maybe 20 pounds.
Oh, not too bad.
Yeah.
Not too bad. Yeah. But you also had a rifle, didn't you? Had a
Well,
M1 and so
that's
forth.
another war story.
Good. Let's hear that one.
I had training on an M1,
Yep.
50 caliber machine gun, and the nice little rifle that we had at that time, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I became second gunner on the mortar, they handed me a 45, which I had never seen.
A sidearm. How about that?
So this old sergeant that I was talking about said, well, we'll have to let you try it out. So there was a tree, I guess it was that big around, maybe even bigger, and it wasn't 25 feet away, and I fired 3 times at that tree and didn't come close to it. I thought at that point I'd rather have a rock in my pocket than that 45. But I carried it. I don't think I ever fired that 45, if I remember.
Did you bring that home?
No, but I brought 2 guns home.
Did you?
I brought the Luger, which was our sergeant of the guard in PW camp, 1916 model.
How about
And I brought a Belgium P25, which looks just like a 45, except it's about that long.
Small.
And I smuggled those home in my duffel bag.
Yeah.
Because 3 times they asked us to turn them in,
Oh, sure.
but they didn't check, and
Yeah.
they came home with me.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Now, we're getting to the point where you got captured. Now, many of us have seen the movie Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it? Don't want to see it.
I try not to go to war movies.
I understand. Well, what you're telling us so far is fairly reminiscent of that, and I think Spielberg did a pretty good depiction of what it was like, because here were the Americans in a building,
Yep.
see, in a small village, and the Germans were coming, and how did you get captured? Now, you were in the building,
We were in the building.
the whole company.
Yep, 72 of us. That's all that was left of the 180, which is the normal strength.
You'd lost all those men?
Oh yeah, we were all captured. Yeah.
My gosh.
There were 13 out of the company that broke off and ended up in a pigsty. Now, I read this in the company history. They were under a pigsty, and they got back,
No kidding.
but the rest of us were all captured.
How about that? Now, what did they do? You load you on,
We were in this
Vehicles?
little village of Liverganano,
you had to march.
and this artillery barrage that we wanted before we were captured came in we were captured, I think, around 10:30 in the morning. After they ran us out, and they were in a hurry to get us out. And they ran us into what looked like a garage, which was in the side of this mountain. Well, it really wasn't a mountain, but it was several hundred feet high. And this was dug into that mountain. They got us in there, and probably 15 minutes after we were there, the artillery barrage came in. Then we found out that they had our 300 radio coordinates. They were in communication with the battalion just like we were. They knew this was coming in.
Gosh.
We also found out that in this village, which we were told when we shoved off that night to go into it, that there was no resistance there, was, according to the Germans, a battalion of tanks reinforced with a company of men. Or maybe vice versa, a company of tanks, maybe it was reinforced with a battalion of men. But there were a lot of Germans in this little town.
Wow.
And to make a long story short, after we were captured, they tell me that they stayed in this little town of Liverganaro until spring. We were captured in October, and they did not move out of this town until the next spring. So they stayed there about 4 months.
Wow.
And just held that position.
How did you get supplies and everything?
Well, they took the town finally.
Oh, they did.
But they didn't try to go on down Highway 65 toward Bologna.
Oh.
This was 10 miles south of Bologna. And you ask how they took us out of there. We marched out of there and went down Highway 65. I don't know how far we went, but probably a couple of miles, maybe more. And they took us in a house, and that's where they interrogated us. We all stripped down, and I didn't get interrogated because they seemed to know more about us than we knew about them from those that were interrogated.
Really?
And they came out and told us. So we stayed there that day. Then they brought a truck up and trucked us into Bologna, where there was a pretty, I don't want to say large camp, but there were probably 200 or 300 prisoners in this camp. And we were there for like 2 weeks before they put us on a train, took us up through the, through the Brenner Pass, which we had been told was knocked out, but we went right through it on these 40 and 8 cars that you probably heard about.
Sure.
And we ended up at Stalag 7A in Moosburg, which is northeast of Munich.
Now, Stalag 7 was
Stalag 7A.
that was a very famous camp.
And we spent 4 months there, and we go in every morning early and work in Munich, and then they bring us back on the train at night. They were working us 7 days a week, and somebody decided we better complain about that because the Geneva Convention says 6 days, I think. So we complained, and they turned dogs into the compound, so we didn't go to the latrine that night. And the next day, while they took the dogs out, they also turned them in on the Greek compound a week or two later. And the Greeks were more inventive than we were, I guess, because they had them hanging on the fence the next day. But they had knives that they had made, and I have a couple of items that I got from them that they gave me.
The Greeks had a ferocious nature about them, didn't they?
They had been there a long time too, I think.
And they'd really suffered.
Yeah, but they were very ingenuity.
Yeah. Well, in the camp now, besides being taken into Munich and work, you're working on what? Roads and clearing up the city, or what?
Railroads quite a bit, tamping ties, which was against the Geneva Convention.
Oh, it was.
But, you know, you're kind of helpless. You're kind of helpless.
Yeah.
We cleaned debris off the streets, swept up in the main rail terminal in Munich, swept up in the famous beer hall which we have now across the river. And they weren't using the beer hall. It had been bombed, but we cleaned up the inside and got the debris out. And then we worked in, English Garden, which is a big park in Munich. They had a communication system for telegraph, which was underground vacuum tubes. And some of our wonderful bombers had knocked some of those out. And our job was a nice old civilian guard would take us out every morning, and we'd go to the park, English Garden, and we'd dig these tubes up. We didn't replace them, but we dug them up so that they could come in and replace them. And here again, we're helping the war effort, which wasn't right, but I guess to save our rear ends.
Well, they had a gun in your back, so to speak.
Yeah, we had guns.
Were the guards pretty decent, or were they tough?
If you didn't turn too much against them, you were all right. If you decided you weren't going to do what they wanted you to do, you'd get a butt of the rifle in your rear. And sometimes I think we deserved it.
Were there
any? Some guys could be pretty mean.
Oh, I'm sure they could. I'm sure they could. Well, we had a convention here. I don't mean me, but I attended it. Stalag Luft 3 had its big convention here back in February, and I went down and just to sit in and meet the fellows and talk to them and so forth, and then, of course, we know about The Great Escape, saw the movie, read the book, Did you have any attempts to break out?
Myself, no. No, we had some that did.
Your outfit?
But they couldn't get across the Rhine River.
Well,
they could get to the Rhine River.
Sure.
It was so cold that they
gosh.
couldn't get across, and they'd end up bringing them back, and they'd put them in confinement for a week with one blanket, no heat. That was their punishment.
Terrible, 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 terrible. And of course, this was winter time now.
Oh yes, oh yeah.
So you
November,
were there.
December, January, February, March.
You were there 4 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I was in PW camp 7.
7. Good heavens.
The last 3 months of the war, we were moved. There were 150 of us. They moved right into Munich. And we were right across the main marshalling yards. There was a street between our lager and the main marshalling yard. And it was either January 25th or February 25th, we had what BBC said was a 1,200 plane raid. And our bomb shelter was a Spatenbrow Brewery, which was a 4-story, big stone. You know how they're built over there. Walls this thick. It was a very durable building, and we were in the basement. But we got 9 direct hits on that building, on that raid. And the brewery was set up in a U shape, and they had tunnels on the basement going from one part to the other to wheel beer back and forth. And one of the bombs came through one of those tunnels, but it was a dud. And this great sergeant that we all hated of the guard said if that had gone off, we would have all been killed from the concussion. And that's the sergeant that nobody liked until that day. He was the only one. He went around calming down people. We had some civilians in the bomb shelter. And he was calming them down and calming the rest of us down, because it was just sort of like bedlam. The big floor was just shaking. I can't imagine how the Germans and the British were able to withstand all the bombing that they took.
I know, it must have been just horrendous.
But from that day on, this sergeant, who we all hated, had more respect for him than any of the other guards. That's whose gun I have, by the way.
Oh, that, you got his Luger. Does he know that?
No,
He didn't know that.
no. We were liberated in that same bomb shelter,
Now, you were liberated, now what we're talking about?
right in Munich.
In May or?
In May, it was, I think, around the 30th of May.
Okay, 1945.
And we had 2 soldiers came down the steps, and we were free. We had no command, but we just were kind of running wild.
You just walked away.
Yep. And we did recommend that this sergeant, if there was any way he could get some lenient treatment, we felt that he deserved it because he was
nice.
Good soldier, mean, but when it came to the nitty-gritty of
Humanity.
war, right,
Yeah.
he was a hell of a man.
Well, isn't that something? That's
Yeah.
a very interesting story. Because we all have,
Yeah,
you know, and then, you know, back 30 and 40 years ago on television, you know, the funny so-called television programs that were just kind of ludicrous, you know, really. But now, did you get wounded?
well, I don't like to admit I
You got a Purple
wounded.
Heart?
Yeah, but I don't brag about it.
Okay, well,
We got it.
I understand.
This building we were in, they were on the hill over here, they were dropping mortar shells on top of the building. And then they had the front of the building, they had us zeroed in, and they had the tanks behind that were pounding the building. This sounds almost like the Air Force. There we were with one engine out and the wings shot off. But anyway, that was basically our situation. And we did have a couple of shells come down in, and I got a little nick, and I didn't deserve it. So I don't even talk about it.
Well, I know, but, you know, I've often thought, and I've never discussed it with anybody, but I've often thought prisoners of war, although they might not have been wounded, there should have been some special award, I would think.
Well, we have a medal.
You have a medal.
Oh yeah.
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 And you got a ribbon.
Well, it's
you got a ribbon for
yeah,
it,
yeah. It's like the other medals,
But it is
like
a
the
prisoner.
Purple Heart, and yeah, it's just for prisoners of war.
Just for prisoners of war.
I tell you, I think they've taken very good care of prisoners of war. I
Right.
truly think that.
Good.
First of all, as I told you earlier, I came back and got 2 degrees on the GI Bill.
Yeah.
That's enough reward for anybody, I think.
Well,
And I came back. That was enough reward.
well, that's it. You're
Yeah.
exactly right. And
Right.
I felt the same way.
Yep.
I had some wild experiences too, but it was a blessing that we got through, and and then to have the government treat us so well, and not only to get your education paid for, but to give you a stipend as well, you know, for food.
I don't know how much I got. 600. I got back pay for being in PW camp.
How about
too.
that? Well, that was
$21 a month for 7 months. 150
hey.
or 100. That was a lot of money in those days. While I was in college, I bought a new Chevrolet for $1,200
How about that? Isn't that great?
and
Now-
paid for it on the $75 a month that I got stipend for the
Sure.
education.
Absolutely.
How can anybody ask for anything
Oh,
more?
I know that was. Oh, it was
Yeah.
just a great thing, and as you point out, it was a morale booster as well as a great support.
Yeah.
But it really made you feel good.
Oh,
and
yeah.
everything. Now, how did you get out of the camp and get back to the States?
We were free for 2 weeks. You know, we just ran around and borrowed automobiles and I wanted a Leica camera. Well, needless to say, I didn't find it, but I'll have to admit I was looking.
Yeah.
But anyway, after 2 weeks, a sergeant came into our camp where we were stationed, 150 of us, and said, we're going to pick you up, I don't know, tomorrow or the next day, take you to the airport and fly you out of here. And I'd never been on an airplane and wasn't looking forward to that, but I was sure ready to go. And so they did. They brought trucks in and shipped us to the airport and put us on DC-3s. DC-3s. And
Now this was out of Munich?
Yes, yep. We took off from Munich and landed somewhere in France on one of these landing mats.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, when we came down, I thought we were dead. It hit, and it was such a racket. But anyway, we refueled, and then they took us to Le Havre. We spent 3 days in Le Havre. They deloused us, gave us new uniforms and new shoes, and we kept our duffel bag and got on a Liberty ship 17 days. We went from Le Havre to Liverpool and stayed in the Mediterranean there and picked up a convoy and came back.
How about
into New York. And from we hit the dock and went to Camp Kilmer. I got a week leave, went home, and from there they sent us down to Miami Beach for R&R for 2 weeks, which ended up 1 week, which was fine. And I was there on August the 6th, 1945, which is my birthday. And Mr. Truman, thank God, dropped the big bomb because I thought we were going to go out the other way. Prisoners couldn't go back into Europe, but we could go to Japan.
Go to the Pacific.
But Mr. Truman took care of that.
Yeah. He made,
and we
he made a great decision there.
Yep, he sure did.
He was a man of decisive action.
Yep, absolutely.
And we have him to thank
absolutely
for so much.
Yep.
Well, then you got back, eventually you got back to Oxford.
Yes.
And your family welcomed you warmly, of course. And
oh, yes.
Glad to have their son back.
Yeah.
And my gosh.
Yeah.
And now we got a couple of minutes left. Tell us about your becoming a professor at Miami University.
Well, I, of course, taught school at Hugh. Well, first I taught at Van Wert, Ohio for 3 years.
Van Wert.
Coached football and basketball.
Oh, you did?
And
Wow.
taught industrial arts.
All right.
And we had our first child there. And my wife was a terrible place for I loved it. It was the 3 of the most enjoyable 3 years of teaching that I had. But I was gone all the time. I was out scouting or coaching, and she was home. And Van Wert's a nice little retired farm town, very nice, but not much for a woman to do. And it was a 2-class town, a class here and a class down here, and teachers were in this class.
Really?
And we couldn't afford to join the country club, of which there was only one. And so we had 3 years there where I had an enjoyable time, but I found out my wife really wasn't enjoying it. Had a chance to come back and teach at Hughes, and so I took it. And I came back and taught 11 years at Hughes, then went to Aiken, retired from Aiken in 1977. In 1965, I had a good friend who was head of the industrial arts department at Miami University, and I was able to go up there and teach 2 nights a week for 3 years, and then from there I taught in both the branch campuses just 2 nights a week. But it was a nice supplement for my retirement because the pay that I made the year I retired was $18,900 with a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, 20 hours in the direction of a doctorate, and that's what I retired on.
Wow.
So my retirement was not too great, but I was able to supplement it with this little bit that I got from Miami University, so it worked out very well.
Well, that's just terrific. Now, how long have you lived here in Cincinnati since?
Came back in 53.
53.
And lived in an apartment in Northside for 3 years. Built a little house that people didn't think they could build on the lot in Clifton on Riddlecrest Lane. And built that house. About the lot for $850.
How about that?
Paid $12,000 for the house. A friend of mine was a builder, and he put it up for us. Lived 8 years in that, sold that, not for a lot of money, and bought a lot in Mount Airy on Riddlecrest Lane, Hummingbird Court, I'll get it, maybe, and had a house built. Well, I built the house there. Had $23,000 in that one.
How about that? Well, you've had a wonderful career,
Yep.
Bob.
Yes, I'll agree with you.
It's just great.
I've been extremely fortunate.
You have, and you got a wonderful.
Had a nice wife for 51 years.
How about that?
Unfortunately, she smoked, and we lost her in '99,
Oh dear.
and have a second wife now.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, I met
Very
your
good.
second wife, and she's
Yeah.
lovely, and you're a very, very fortunate man. Well, I think we've just about come to the end of the tape here. I just want to express to you our great thanks for not only your service and your dedication to your wonderful American citizenship and your teaching of young people and everything, but also to know you as a friend. And I feel very honored about that, and I want to thank you.
well, I want to thank you
And God
for
bless.
being a wonderful interviewer
Well,
and
thank you.
a great veteran. I want to thank Dennis
Dennis does
for
a great
handling the
job. He
video.
did the whole thing, and we thank you all very much.